getting it happening. Here we go.
Okay, got it. Well, welcome everybody, and a very important season we're in, the Chanukah, very appropriate festival of lights in a time of darkness, it seems to be to me. So, Rabbi, we're listening with great interest to what you're going to share today.
Thanks as always, Barry. To put it mildly, we the Jewish people have never had a shortage of adversaries and enemies, as we can see today. And broadly speaking, there were those enemies that sought our annihilation. So historically, that was Amalek, certainly the Nazis. There are others that were opposed to us ideologically. In other words, what we stood for. It was a spiritual war, and that was a prime example of the Greeks. And in more contemporary times, communism. It was opposed to what we as Jews believed in, against monotheism, against the values of the Torah. And yes, there were other enemies that really attacked us bodily. They wanted our destruction, and they were against what we stood for ideologically. Perhaps a case in point, Hamas today. So the Greeks actually did not want to, who were controlling Judea at that time, as we'll discuss briefly, did not want to destroy the Jewish people physically. They didn't want to annihilate them, but it was a spiritual war of monotheism, really, and paganism. And that message, even though the story is one that took place over 2,400 odd years ago, but the message is there. Light needs to penetrate the darkness and to illuminate the world, and certainly many of you are involved in spreading the light of God throughout all of humanity. Right, so let us begin with the historical context of what occurred. The Greek era of overtaking Judea took place in the year 1319, before the Common Era began with Alexander the Great. Quite interestingly, the rabbis and the Jewish people at the time had a very good relationship with Alexander, as we'll talk about. But things, after he passed away at a very young age, subsequently his generals took over, and one general in particular, a descendant at least, was Antiochus IV, sought to Hellenize the empire, a part of which was Judea, and that caused the tension at that time. Just to give a brief overview.
On Chanukah, we light the menorah, or Chanukiah, for 8 nights, adding another flame each night. But what's the story behind this beloved holiday? Well, once upon a time, more than 2,200 years ago, the Jews lived in the Holy Land, where they worked the land, studied Torah, and worshipped God in the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. But all was not well. Like much of the known world, Jerusalem was under Greek rule, and Hellenism, Greek culture, Greek architecture, and yes, Greek philosophy and idolatry had spread far and wide, even to the Holy Land, which was then ruled by the Seleucids, a faction of Greeks stationed in Syria and led by the cruel king Antiochus IV. The Greeks placed an idol in the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. Jews were forced to eat pork, and Shabbat, Jewish holidays, and circumcision were all outlawed. Their unwavering commitment to God's Torah drove the Greeks crazy. Why can't these people just become Greek like us and everyone else under our control? In the village of Modi'in, the Greek troops built an altar in the town square, and a Hellenist Jew, that's a Jew following Greek culture, was about to sacrifice a pig to the Greek gods upon it, when an elderly priest named Matityahu could not stand idly by the public desecration and slew him. Matityahu, his 5 sons, and other loyal Jews fled to a mountain hideout to stage guerrilla attacks and prepare for the all-out war they knew was inevitable. Before his passing, old Matityahu encouraged his followers to continue the fight, following his son, Judah the Maccabee, into battle. That's right, Judah the Maccabee, the original superhero. Judah and his warriors were outnumbered, outweaponed, and helplessly undertrained, while the Greeks even had war elephants, the tanks of the ancient world. But the Maccabees were brave, knew the local terrain, and most importantly, had boundless faith in God. And ultimately, they miraculously won over the Greeks. Upon liberating Jerusalem, they found the temple defiled and converted into a house of pagan worship. They wanted to relight the temple menorah, the 7-branched candelabra that was to be lit every day as a sign of God's continued presence among us. But there was a problem. In the words of the Talmud, they searched and found only one jar of oil that was intact with the seal of the high priest, and there was just enough oil to burn for one day. A miracle occurred, and they lit the menorah from it for 8 days. And so the mighty fell into the hands of the weak, the many into the hands of the few. God made a miracle to show how he cherishes our faith and dedication, especially when the odds are stacked against us. And the Jews could once again study Torah and keep the mitzvahs. We celebrate this every year, starting on the 25th of Kislev. We fry up some latkes, donuts, spin the dreidel, and most importantly, sing praises to God and light our menorahs every evening, bringing bright points of light into the dark and gloomy nights. Happy Chanukah.
Okay, so let's just unpack a little bit of the synopsis, what we've just did. When Alexander the Great, or in the biblical text, they actually called him Alexander the Macedonian, when he entered Jerusalem. Actually, Michael, you can read this.
Okay. When Alexander the Macedonian entered Jerusalem to destroy the temple, the high priest Shimon the Righteous, on hearing this, robed himself in priestly garment, and some of the noblemen of Israel went with him carrying fiery torches in their hands. They walked all night until the dawn rose. When Alexander saw Shimon the Righteous, he descended from his horse and bowed down before him. His general said to him, "A great king like yourself should bow down before this Jew." He answered, "It is his image that leads me to victory in all my battles."
So he had this vision of an old man that used to pray for him, and this was the high priest of Israel. In recognition of Alexander's benevolence to Judea at the time, the rabbis decreed that all Jewish boys should be called Alexander. And to this day, Alexander is actually an accepted Hebrew name. It's called Alexander, or the abbreviation Sender. And it's quite a known name within the Jewish religious circles. Many stories about Alexander in the Talmud and his interaction with the rabbis and his debates with them. Just to share one, was they actually gave him a riddle of a scale. And on one side of the scale, they put an object and they put a cover over the object. And the other side of the scale, they kept pouring specks of gold. And as much as they poured on one side of the scale, the item that was there was heavier, the item that was covered. And they asked him, "What's the item?" And he didn't know, and they lifted up the cover, and it was a human eye. And the message being that the human eye is insatiable, and basically telling him a message: when is enough enough? And indeed, he passed away at the young age of 33, having conquered all the known world at that time. The relationship with the Jewish people and the Greeks actually is already alluded to in the Torah, in the story of Noah. Noah had 3 sons, Yefet, Shem, and Ham, and there's a verse that says, "May God expand Yefes," and Yefes in our tradition was Greece, "and he will dwell in the tents of Shem," which is the descendants of the Jewish people. So in other words, there is a potential for a relationship there. And indeed, King Ptolemy at one point asked 72 of the elders to translate the Torah into Greek. He put them in 72 separate rooms, and remarkably, they all came up with the same Greek translation. So that never happened in Jewish history again, that 72 rabbis agreed. He didn't get two rabbis to agree.
To agree.
So God actually created a miracle there, but because of that, the Greek language, Greek culture, acquired a certain sanctity and respect in Jewish tradition. In fact, throughout the Talmud, there are nearly 2,000 Greek words. The word for the Jewish High Court was called the Sanhedrin, a Greek word. On Pesach night, the last piece of matzah that we eat is called an afikomen, which is a Greek word for dessert. So potential, one of our great sages, also Maimonides, frequently reaches out to Aristotle. But having said that, there was also the flip side of the coin. Perhaps, okay, David, I can see you. Perhaps you want to read this piece? Yeah.
The impact of Hellenization on educated Jews was in many ways similar to the impact of the Enlightenment on the 18th century ghetto. It was a destabilizing force spiritually, and it was a secularizing materialistic force. In response to Hellenization, internal conflict soon arose within the Jewish people as those who favored the new trend confronted those who did not. Eventually, there developed a movement of Jews whose aim it was to force the pace of Hellenization by purging Judaism of those elements that limited the advancement of Greek culture.
And certainly that tension was brought out, as we'll see, by this Greek ruler Antiochus. But I just want to share with you this because it's actually quite relevant because a lot of the original
century AD.
The original scriptures were obviously Hebrew, but in terms of the New Testament, were originally in Greek. So she just shares with us a bit of this.
Jews had a long history in Egypt. Jewish community were spread all over the country, but it is especially in Alexandria that a big, thriving community was rooted and established. These Jews, of course, brought with them their culture and, above all, their scriptures. It is mostly their scriptures that came to us written on papyri. The name Septuagint derives from the 70 saviors that allegedly were invited by King Ptolemy II to translate the Jewish Bible for his famous library. It is more probable that the process of translating the Jewish Bible into Greek was a bottom-up endeavor. That is, Jews who were living since centuries among Greeks and other people living in Egypt in this sort of melting pot needed to have their scriptures translated into Greek, which was becoming also their most used language. One example, which is this one, is dating to the 1st century AD, and although these scriptures and the Septuagint was adopted later on by Christians, we are sure that this fragment from a papyrus roll is certainly Jewish, because the main scribe left a space for a second one to write down the name of God, Yahweh, using the tetragram. So it was essential for them to have a Greek translation of the Torah, the law, and the other scriptures which are collected in the Jewish Bible, and that later on passed to become the Old Testament for Christians.
Okay, a bit of history there. So things came to a head in the year 199 when Antiochus assumed the leadership. David or Barry, can you nominate somebody? I can't see anybody else.
Moshi, would you like to read?
Thank you. Antiochus IV. In 199 BCE, Antiochus assumed the Seleucid throne. This monarch saw as his life's mission spreading Greek culture and religion throughout his empire. The Hellenist Jews were delighted with Antiochus. He plundered the Bas Hamech, the temple, thank you, Rabbi, and turned it into a pagan temple. The divine service was abolished, and statues of Greek idols were set up. Hogs were offered on the altar to Greek gods. Antiochus also instituted harsh decrees aimed at destroying the Jewish life. Indeed, the 3 years of Antiochus's evil decrees are among the blackest in Jewish history, despite the fact that the Jews dwelled in their land and the Bas Mikdash temple was still standing.
So it was quite a unique situation. Actually, in Judea, the temple was still standing, but they were the dominant power, and they placed particularly harsh decrees on the Jewish people. Again, they were there to uproot the divinity of Jewish beliefs. You can certainly practice your culture for cultural reasons, but not for divine reasons. That was the essence of what they were on about. They attacked particularly circumcision. They outlawed that because they saw the human body as being perfect. Therefore, one must not destroy the human body. As we know, it was the Greeks that founded the Olympics. I mean, the body was supreme, and that sort of filtered through to their whole culture. But as we can see from Maimonides, David just gets something to read. He just succinctly sums up what occurred at that time. Yeah.
Janine, are you there?
Yes, I am, but I've just got to get rid of the panel. The Greeks aimed to detach the Jewish people from tradition. During the times of the Second Temple, when the Greeks ruled over the Jewish people, they instituted decrees against them and attempted to destroy their religion. They did not allow the Jews to study Torah or perform mitzvot.
Commandments.
Sorry?
Yeah, commandments.
Yeah. They took their money and their daughters, and they entered and defiled the temple. The Greeks subjected the Jews to great hardships and pressured them immensely until the God of their fathers had pity on them and saved them.
That was the period, the era that was prevalent. This is quite interesting, just a historical perspective as well.
The hoard is super unique. It connects us directly to the period before the decrees of Antiochus. So this is the first archaeological evidence that directly verifies the events mentioned in the book of Maccabees about the Maccabees rebellion. The excavation was held by the Israel Antiquities Authority together with the civil administration in Judea and Samaria and the Ministry of Heritage and Jerusalem. We conducted an archaeological excavation in Murabat cave. In one of the chambers of the cave, we found a small wooden box, very beautiful. Everybody in the cave were very excited about that. We took the artifact to the laboratories of the Israel Antiquities Authorities. We conducted few examinations, including CT. We opened the cover of the box. We found purple cloth of textile that covered 15 silver coins from the time of Ptolemy Philomator VI. The latest coin in the hoard was dated to 170 BCE. That's a very special moment in the history of the land of Israel. Actually, it's before the decrees of Antiochus against the Jewish religion. They fled to hiding places in the desert. Eventually, the Seleucids went after them and killed all of them. A report came to the king's men and to the forces in Jerusalem, the city of David, that men who had violated the command of the king had gone down to the hiding places in the desert.
During the project, we found a lot of organic materials like seeds, fabrics, ropes, and they were well preserved mainly because the very dry climate in the desert. And in this particular object, it was preserved very good. It looks like someone made it 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, excuse the puns. They obviously found somebody's piggy bank. Look, I just they make reference to the Book of Maccabees, which is interesting. It was a book written about events of the period, very similar to the scroll of Esther that occurred in regards to the salvation of the Jewish people from Haman. Whereas the Book of Esther was the part of the Jewish scriptures and the canon. The Book of Maccabees was not included. Having said that, I do believe the Catholics have it as part of their scriptures. But nevertheless, we do refer to it for historical purposes. So the hero at that time was a man called Matisyahu. He was a leader of a family they called the Hasmonaim. It was either because there was a town called Hasmonim at the time, or Hashmonim in the Book of Psalms means nobles. He had 5 sons, and after he passed away, Judah became his successor. Today we have a Jewish sports group called the Maccabi, and again this comes from Maccabee. There are 2 reasons for the name. One, it's an acronym for the biblical verse. One meaning Mi Kamoicha Ba'elim B'Hashem, who is like you, O God. Alternatively, it could mean that an acronym for his name, Matisyahu, he was a Cohen, the son of Yochanan, which is Makav, which means a hammer. But in all events, today we've got a Jewish sports club called Maccabi, which draws its inspiration from this name. He led the revolt in the year 166 in the city of Modeim. David?
Jenny, are you available there to read? You have to unmute.
Sure. The revolt. In 166 BCE, the elderly Matthias, together with his 5 sons, moved to Modin to escape the persecution. When Greek troops arrived at Modin, they instructed the Jews to meet in the town square where the pagan ritual, which included the sacrifice of a pig to Zeus, would take place. As a town elder and a priest, Matthias was called upon to perform the sacrifice.
And we're quoting here from the Book of Maccabees, and this is what he said. So this is a record of the events as recorded in the Book of Maccabees. Yep.
God forbid that we should forsake the law and the ordinances. We will not hearken to the king's words to go from our religion, either on the right hand or the left. Maccabees 2:21-22. Defying Matthias's heroic stance, a Hellenized Jew came forward to sacrifice the pig. At that moment, the elderly priest stabbed him and killed the Greek commander as well. The war had officially begun. Within a year of launching the revolt, he died.
I think what we've got to appreciate over here that the Greeks were the great empire, superpower of the day. There was no formal army of Judea. It was just a groundswell revolt that was started by Matisyahu, Matthias, and then subsequently taken on by his son Yehuda. As we'll see from the verses, he was not only a great warrior, but in true biblical fashion, he understood his victories came not from the power of his own might, but really from God. David?
Tony, you available there? Unmute.
Judah Maccabee is one of the great heroes in Jewish history. He is often viewed as a brave warrior and military genius who led his men to victory against seemingly insurmountable odds. However, Judah's true greatness stemmed from the fact that he never lost sight of the real source of his successes. It is easy for many to be defeated by few, for in the sight of heaven, there is no difference between saving by many or by few. It is not on the size of the army that victory in battle depends, but strength comes from heaven. They come against us in great disrespect and lawlessness to destroy us and our wives and our children and to despoil us. But we fight for our lives and our laws. He himself will crush them before us.
As we can see very clearly, he's a man that is divinely inspired, great belief and great trust in God. And again, this was not a one-day game. It was the victory, as we'll see in this next clip, which goes to the place of the battle. It's something that occurred over 3 years, and there were a number of significant battles that the Jews had to win at that time before victory was achieved.
The story of the Maccabees revolt has inspired many people throughout the years. In 166 BCE, a small group of Jewish rebels managed to defeat the Seleucid Empire and establish a Jewish state in the Holy Land. The Book of Maccabees mentions 8 battles. Some of them took place in the famous Ayalon Valley, about midway between modern Jerusalem and Tel Aviv.
The place where we stand is exactly in the midst between the coastline to Jerusalem mountains, and that is the area that was always ideal for many armies to cross on the way. In the book of Joshua, it says that Joshua commands the sun and the moon to stop and refers to the valley of Ayalon, which is right over here. This is where we stand. In the story of Maccabees, the third battle holds supposedly over here in the highest place of this park.
One of the most famous battles of the Maccabees was the Battle of Emmaus, about 20 kilometers west of Jerusalem. It's a site also mentioned in the New Testament as the place where Jesus reappeared after his resurrection.
So we're standing on a high hill that views Emmaus, which is down below on the main road that we can see behind me, and that's the place where the Seleucid camped. Since this is the foothills of the Judean hills and a great strategical point. At the same time, the army of Judah the Maccabee is based or camps himself up in a place called Mitzpah, where is nowadays recognized to be the tradition of Samuel the prophet's tomb. Anyway, between those, the Seleucid army, one of the strongest armies in the history of the Middle East ever, decides to strike the camp by coming surprisingly to the army of Judah the Maccabee, who is already prepared. It says in the book of Maccabees that a day before that, the entire Maccabee camp is fasts and prays and motivates for that, just like the biblical days, and secretly during the same night comes to strike down the Seleucid army, who apparently is unprepared. It's a great victory. It's the third victorious battle in a row.
Khurvat Aked, overlooking the city of Modi'in near the Ayalon Valley, is another key location in the story of the Maccabees.
We can view right behind the city of Modi'in, the modern city of Modi'in. However, in the book of Maccabees, it is mentioned that the Hasmonean family of Matityahu and his 5 children is coming from a town called Modi'in. Obviously, there's a connection between the two. There is also an Arab village that kept the name called Midia. In the early 20th century, based on earlier tradition, it is to be recognized that the tombs of the Maccabees is also not too far away from the city of Modi'in, as well as many coins that goes back to the Hellenist period.
Some of the finds here are associated with the villain of the Maccabees revolt, Seleucid commander Bakhtidis.
The main thing that was found here are remnants of a fortress, some fortified walls, guardian towers, some coins that goes back all the way to the Hellenist period. And based on what it says in the book of Maccabees, it might very much be, at least according to some theories, that this was the fortress of the Seleucid general called Bakrides. According to the book of Maccabees, it says that Bakrides, the Seleucid general who fought against the Maccabees in the year 161 BCE, that is the place where he was based.
The Book of Maccabees mentions the death of the Maccabees leader Judah in the final battle of Elasah in 160. When Judah saw that Bakrides and his main force of the Syrian army was on the right, all his bravest men joined him, and they crushed the Syrians' right wing. They pursued them as far as the foothills, but when the Syrians on the left wing saw that their right wing had been crushed, they turned to attack Judah and his men from the rear. The fighting became very fierce, and many on both sides were killed. Finally, Judah himself was killed. Then all his men fled. Jonathan and Simon took their brother's body and buried it in the family tomb at Modi'in. And there at the tomb they wept for him. All of Israel mourned him in great sorrow for many days. They said, "It can't be. The mighty hero and savior of Israel has been killed." But despite the Maccabees' defeat, the Hasmoneans continued to rule the land of Israel for dozens of years. It was the last Jewish regime in the Holy Land until the formation of Israel in 1948.
Okay. So when they entered the temple, they spent several weeks removing the idols, but then on the 25th day of Kislev, the priests, the Kohanim, were ready to resume the service. There was a traditional gold candelabra menorah. Just to explain, the temple menorah has 7 branches, and that was lit every single day by the high priest. It was filled up with jars of pure olive oil, and they needed a jar of olive oil that had the seal of the high priest. They only found 1 jar of oil. They utilized that 1 jar to light the 7-branch candelabra, but miraculously that jar kept refilling for 8 days until they managed to go to the olive groves and get more olive oil and bring it back to the temple. So in recognition of the miracle that this small jar of oil lasted 8 days, the next year the rabbis ordained an 8-day festival of Chanukah, where we light an 8-branched candelabra to signify the miracle. So again, the temple menorah had 7 lights, but the Chanukah menorah, Chanukah in modern Israel, has 8 candles, and every day we add to the candle, as we can see in the background. Last night we lit the first candle, then tonight we'll light 2, and for the next 8 days we will add 1 candle to a total of 8. The rabbis, reflecting back on history, chose to highlight the festival with the miracle of the oil, the miracle of light. Yes, there was a military victory, and we just acknowledge that, not directly, but in a prayer that we add over the next 7 days. But the rabbis are generally, of course, we need to win wars, but celebrating victories of war is really not the focus. The focus always has to be the outcome, something positive, and in this particular case it was a victory of light over darkness, and that's why the emphasis on this festival is lighting the menorah. David, if somebody can read this.
Ian, are you there?
The military victory, Al Nissim liturgy. In the days of Mattiyahu, the son of the high priest, the Hasmonean, and his sons, when the evil Greek kingdom rose up against your nation Israel to make them forget your Torah and to turn them away from the statutes of your will, you in your abundant mercy stood by them in their time of distress. You delivered the strong into the hands of the weak, the many into the hands of the few. the impure into the hands of the pure, the wicked into the hands of the diligent students of your Torah. And for your people, Israel, you performed a great deliverance and redemption unto this very day. Afterwards, your sons entered the holy of holies of your abode, cleaned your temple, purified your sanctuary, and kindled lights in your holy courtyards, and designated these 8 days of Hanukkah to thank and praise your great name.
As we can see, certainly we allude to God's benevolence in allowing us to overcome the great military army of the day, the great superpower. But the emphasis is really on that miracle. And as we've mentioned, we celebrate so how is Chanukah observed? So firstly, every day we light the Chanukah in our homes. Over the last recent decades, Chanukah menorahs have been lit in the public square. I think they had a lighting in Fed Square. There's a lighting in Parliament, I think on Monday, and certainly in other prominent places. I think this year in particular with the war, we all pray for the victory of light over darkness and peaceful lightings in the public arena. So with the other custom is that we actually give children, we give them what we call Chanukah geld, really coins, money. Certainly we give coins, money to the poor, because the lighting of a Chanukah menorah in days of old was an expense, because we light with pure olive oil. There's an actually interesting debate by the rabbis if you've only got enough money for lighting a Chanukah menorah or lighting of Shabbat candles. The preference goes to Shabbat candles, because the purpose of Chanukah candles is to remind us of the miracle. The purpose of Shabbat candles is to bring peace into the home, because in days when there was no electricity, these candles shed light. And if you have light in a home, there's peace. You don't bump into each other. So peace always takes priority. The word Chanukah also comes from education. And at that point, children started to learn Torah once again, which was outlawed. So to encourage children to continue with their studies, their Torah studies, we give them charity. And also to remind us it was the Greeks that robbed us of our material possessions. We give charity as well, Chanukah geld, to those in need. And finally, the essence of all Jewish holidays is they tried to kill us. We won, so let's eat. So certainly the rabbis have oily foods the go. There is the fine print says, any donuts you eat on Chanukah, you will not gain calories. There's fried potato latkes that we have, but at a deeper level as well. In Hebrew, the word for oil is shemen. It is also the root word of shmeina, which is 8, which reminds us of the 8 days of Chanukah. The number 8 in Kabbalah, in the mystical writings, is always a number that identifies with transcendence. We have 7 colors of the rainbow, 7 days of the week. Number 8, something higher, and that's why a child is circumcised, a boy, on the 8th day. The oil is also representative of wisdom, and therefore oil always floats to the top. So oil representing Torah always floats to the top and shows the transcendence of Torah over secular and pagan cultures. Finally, one of the other cute little customs is the dreidel. So it harks back when in Greek times, when the children were not allowed to learn Torah, when they saw a Greek soldier coming, they put away the books and they took out this little toy. And it has 4 letters on it. The top, it says Nes, a great miracle, Godol, great, Hoyu, was, Shomder. But really, it's a children's gambling game, if you will. So you put money in the middle, and if it lands on Nun, you get nothing. If it's Gimel, you get the whole pot. Hey, you get half, and if it lands on Shin, you have to put money in. So it's a children's game, but as we'll soon see in the video, it has a deeper significance as well. So as we can see, even a simple thing as the dreidel has a deeper significance. I just want to conclude with this clip, which is very powerful. Just goes for a few moments. that note, Chanukah, just want to turn the recording off and